Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with random reviews from the Overflow Room. And today we're talking about, my goodness, 3 composers or 2? 3, actually. Rather interesting stuff, beginning with the immortal Fritz Kreisler. I had more Kreisler than I ever really knew or wanted, to be honest. I mean, he was an amazing soloist, of course, and one of the great violinists of the 20th century, but also a composer of charming sniglets, little violin miniatures, some of which were so convincing that he was able to pass them off as the work of other composers, which is really rather cool, actually. He was the dedicatee of Elgar's well, not the dedicatee, but Elgar wrote his violin concerto for him, which he performed but never recorded, which is a pity. I would have liked to have heard that. Anyway, he composed also a major string quartet, serious work, big work. And here it is with the Brodsky Quartet, coupled to Korngold's second string quartet on Challenge Classics. This is fun. You know, it's obviously tonal. It's Viennese. It's got all these, it's lusciousness. The tunes are not perhaps top drawer, but it's a good work. And the interesting thing about it for me was, I have the score, and I got it during my vibrato studies when I was doing all that performance practice stuff, because I wanted to see what Kreisler did. This is important because Kreisler was the champion of continuous vibrato. Everybody thought he had the most gorgeous, seductive violin tone in the universe. And if he was using continuous vibrato, and everybody was using continuous vibrato, why would he add vibrato? And he does, even though he's using continuous vibrato. And what this tells us, if you look at the score, is that these people who say that, for example, who was it, Kubik, who said that you should only add vibrato in Mahler's Adagietto on the one note where he marks the word vibrato. They're nuts. Everyone was doing it all the time, and if you write it down, it just means do it all together, or do more, or really ham it up, or, Anyway, so that was the string quartet. Then we've got Kreisler playing Kreisler on Pearl, encores, zillions and zillions of encores. We're going through these quickly because I do not have the patience to go through them slowly. You've got Dvorak's Symphonic Dances, Albani's, Kreisler's own stuff, Dittersdorf, Lehar, Massenet, Mendelssohn, Tchaikovsky, Godofsky, you name it. Faya, yeah. It's all those little transcribed violin hoogies. And here are more of them on RCA, with all different kinds of people, some with orchestra, some with piano, some with string quartet. Oh my goodness, it's just all over the place. Recorded 1910 to 1946. 1910, of course, was quite acoustic, not electrical. You stood in front of the giant horn and you had to try and play a violin. That was tough because the violin did not reproduce well on acoustical recordings. So there's that. That was the RCA one. And now we've got another Pearl thing here. The earlier concerto recordings, 1915 to 26. This is also the pre-electrical era, by and large. So we've got Brahms Violin Concerto, the Mendelssohn Bach Concerto for 2 violins with Ephraim Zimbalist, the Beethoven Concerto and Mozart's Concerto number 4 with various people attached to them. I find most of this stuff to be virtually unlistenable today, but I keep it for historical reasons. Kreisler, early recordings on Music and Arts. Well, these are exactly the same. Well, this is 1924 to 1927 HMV 78s. Ward Marston did the transfers, so you know that you're getting the best possible quality in these particular cases. And we've got the Beethoven Violin Concerto from December 26, the Mendelssohn, the Brahms from 1927. These are all with Leo Blech and the Berlin State Opera Orchestra, and some little encore thingies, and only one acoustical recording. Landon Ronald accompanying in the Mozart Violin Concerto number 4, which is on that other thing, and some Bach accompanied sonata stuff, and it's Kreisler. And then we've got EMI Kreisler, original compositions and arrangements with Franz Rupp, Michael Raucheisen, and the Kreisler String Quartet, which must have been led by Kreisler, right? So here are those, zillions of them, billions and billions of little sniglets. Then a modern Kreisler thing, thank God. James Ennis, who's just such a wonderful violinist, Absolutely first rate, with Edward Laurel piano, doing, oh my goodness, a whole bunch of sort of longer and more interesting Kreisler bits. He does the Devil's Trill Sonata, arranged by Kreisler, and variations on a theme by Corelli, and the Preludium and Allegro in the style of Pugnani. I mean, you always want it to be in the style of Pugnani. And the Sicilienne et Rigodon in the style of Francois Francoeur. Another one. Then there's like all these little bits and other things. That's a really very fine violin disc. It really is. The repertoire is more interesting than most, Kreisler discs. Then, so that's Kreisler. That was Kreisler. We have Joseph Martin Kraus. Now, Joseph Martin Krauss's years were almost identical to Mozart, 1756 to 1792. He was a very good composer. Haydn thought he was a genius, along with Mozart, the only two he knew, according to Haydn. So he, of course, died young. He wrote a lot of theatrical music and ballet music, which is really interesting. And this has a major ballet on it called Fiskarina, The Fisherman. 50 minutes of ballet music, mostly short, but there's some national dances. There's a Hungarian dance and a couple English dances. There's like a hornpipe, which is kind of fun. I reviewed this on ClassicsToday.com, so you can go and have a look at that review if you'd like. It's a not bad review, I must say. It's pretty clear. There are also two pantomimes, which are like miniature sinfonias, and his ballet music for Gluck's Armida, two little numbers, two short numbers. And it's good music. Fiskarina is a find. We don't play much ballet music, before Beethoven's Prometheus, but there was tons of it. There was tons and tons and tons of it. And this is good music. So that's worth hearing. It's on Naxos with the Swedish Chamber Orchestra and Petter Sundqvist. That was a find. And then finally, last but not least, oh my, Hans Krasa. Yeah, Hans Krasa, the Czech composer who was part of the Entartete degenerate art people who were, killed by the Nazis in 1944, actually. He lived 1899 to 1944. This is his opera, Verlobung im Traum, a very curious, sardonic, interesting kind of piece, actually. I mean, the story is that, well, who are these people? Zina is this attractive girl who's in love with a revolutionary named Fedya, who I don't think ever shows up here, does he? I don't think so. But anyway, her mother is really a pushy, overbearing witch, and she decides that Zina should marry the aging old prince who's visiting the town to get his money. And so while he's asleep, he wakes up with this vague dream he mentions just of having proposed to Zina because she's very pretty. And he's sort of joking, but the mother and the soon-to-be mother-in-law says, "No, you really did it." But meanwhile, Paul is in love with Zina. Everyone's in love with Zina. And Zina wants to marry Fedya, and her mother hates Fedya because he's political reactionary. And so they get ready to marry the prince. And her mother convinces Zina she should marry him for her money because money is good. And Zina can't go through with it, and she tells the whole story. The prince is quite grateful and forgives her, and now she can go off and marry Fedya, who dies. He's dead. And Zina spends the rest of her life in a loveless marriage, beautiful but unhappy. Yeah. It's not performed very often. I think we know why. It's a good piece, but it is a very curious. Dostoevsky shows up in it, by the way. It's a very, very unusual work. So there's that. And then we have chamber music, his complete chamber music, actually. String quartet, theme and variations for string quartet. Chamber music for harpsichord and 7 instruments, which is marvelously interesting. Dance for string trio, and Passacaglia and Fugue for string trio in 1944, the year that he was killed. Zuzana Ruzicova is the harpsichordist with the Kotzian Quartet on Praga. So it's a very good disc of very interesting music. And that, my friends, is today's clump from the Overflow Room. So keep on listening and take care.